Hey, welcome back to COM110. And today we're going to be getting into one of the last chapters, I think the last chapter. And this one is chapter 14, focusing on the dark side of interpersonal communication. I like this chapter because so much of our book has been focusing on how to manage relationships, how to understand different types of relationships. And sometimes relationships, they're not working out, and we really experience some really terrible things. Your book starts off with talking about how sometimes communication with others, it ends up really hurting us. It can hurt us emotionally, physically. You can also think about the psychological damage if you've ever been a victim to like gossiping or rumors or even like cyberbullying. And then also too with verbal aggression and deception, so like lies, that can really ruin you. You ruin your relationship and you feel like pretty bad about it. So I do think and I appreciate focusing on like, hey, these negative things happen. We need to understand them so that hopefully we don't do them to other people. And if other people do them to us, we need to understand that and think like, hey, this is not acceptable in any way. It says here, and I'm a big believer in this, the first step is recognizing that something shady is happening here and we need to acknowledge it so then we can prevent these strategies. Righty. I do want to mention that I'm going to talk about, verbal aggression. I'm going to talk about bullying. And so I don't know if these are going to be some sensitive topics for some of us. Just please be aware. I would say pause the video here and kind of look through the chapter and see if there's anything that's kind of triggering. But let's get into it. Let's talk first about secret testing. Now, with secret tests, I want you to think about if you're in a relationship with someone and you think that they're cheating. So there's all these different ways for you to find out that's not really asking them. And so, yes, the most direct way to understand a relationship, it's definitely to talk about it. Talk with your partner, like, hey, I feel like you're cheating, or I feel like you've lost um, some kind of drive within our relationship, you've lost interest. But sometimes timing, it's just not there. We just don't have the opportunity to talk to them. And maybe it's really like eating us up inside. I also think that comfortability is a big one. Imagine having that conversation, if you've ever had it, with someone saying, like, did you cheat on me? So the comfortability here, we don't like it. We don't like being vulnerable. And so with secret tests, we think, I'll get the answers here. I do think that this is interesting because this is where we engage in intra-personal communication. So we haven't talked about that one too much, right? That's just communication like within ourselves. So with intra communication, we spend a huge amount of time thinking about what could be happening, thinking about how we're feeling, thinking about the other person. You have all these questions, and usually in the like early stages of romantic relationships, people often define that stage differently. So there you are, just kind of sitting in it, thinking like, are we exclusive? Are we in a situationship? So that's intrapersonal communication. I remember we talked about uncertainty a while ago, but this is when we experience uncertainty, we want to work towards reducing it. We want to get those answers. Now, if it's being direct, asking questions, or I'm going to show you, I think, seven different indirect secret testing that people do. Now, I have this photo here because I always like to think, when did I first become interested in interpersonal communication? And when my mom would drive me to school, like middle school, maybe even younger, we would listen to the radio and we would also listen to War of the Roses. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before. I definitely encourage you to check it out. I know it's pretty popular, like on TikTok and definitely YouTube, but on the radio, they will usually have, and they're usually heterosexual relationships. And so they'll have a woman that's in a relationship. So let's say me, I call up the radio and I'm like, hey, I think my boyfriend's cheating. So the radio will secretly call my boyfriend, and then say, you want a dozen red romantic roses, completely free. Who do you want to send it to? And so the boyfriend, without knowing he's being recorded on the radio, you can always tell when they're like, send it to, it's like, no, my name better pop up right away. And then they usually send it to someone else. And then they say a sweet little message, like on cards for flowers. Message like, had a great time this weekend. See you next Friday. And then boom, in comes the girlfriend, like, oh my gosh, she sent the flowers to someone else. And so this is a perfect example of a secret test. Now, is it deceptive? Yes, because we're kind of lying, we're like catching him. And so I'm not saying that all your answers will be, you know, figured out on the radio shows. 11-year-olds are driving in the car with their mom. But there's so much of this here, and there's so many like different ways that we can analyze a secret test. I remember one time listening to it, and the guy sent the flowers to his mom. I was like, oh, that's sweet. But the girl got really upset because she was like, those should have gone to me. They were romantic, all this. So then it ends up saying more about her than the actual secret test itself. Can you see how it's pretty complex? So here are 7 different secret tests. You can kind of see where the Word of Roses comes into here. But first off, we have the directness test. You're going to see how they go from like good to worse in a sense. So with the directness test, this is the least secretive one. It involves just asking the person straight up what's happening. This test, it may lead to answers that you don't want to hear though. So you got to be prepared for that. You got to think, okay, at least I'm going to get the answers that I'm searching, even if they make me uncomfortable. This one can be good, but again, it can be hurtful. Then we have the endurance test. So with the endurance test, this is another form of secret testing. And you're with your partner and you're testing their actions and thinking like, okay, how can I see how much they can hold? Think back to one of the theories from a few chapters ago, the costs and benefits. You're testing the endurance of how much you can make your partner cost in the relationship. So it says here, maybe you end up, behaving negatively towards the partner. So you're criticizing oneself to the point of being annoying and making a request that require the partner to exert a great deal of effort here. You're just kind of like being a nag in a sense. You're saying, how much can you take before you break up with me? It does say here that research has shown that in unstable relationships, that's important here. And any secret test involving behaviors that deviate from the norm, it's going to end up leading towards a relationship disengagement. You're going to end up breaking up. So if you're already feeling unstable in the relationship, you're doing any of these tests, which the endurance one is a pretty big one for unstable relationships. It's probably going to end towards the end of your relationship. Now we have indirect suggestions test. And this one involves joking, maybe hinting at a more serious stage. So like if you're with your partner and you say like, what if we just got married right now? And you're secretly like waiting for their reply, but you're also saying it in like a jokingly manner. I know there was a meme going around a while ago and it was like, what if we kiss right now? And you're waiting to see their reaction. You're waiting to see what happens. It does happen a lot when people are trying to be more physical with each other. So you're trying to like test the water almost, and you're seeing what their comfortability is and maybe what you're comfortable with too. Now we have presenting the relationship to outsiders tests, which I look at this kind of as like PDA. You're again watching their reaction. Maybe you're kind of looking at like, is there a mutual commitment involved here? If I go out with my romantic partner and I introduce him as my boyfriend, and then he says, "Oh yeah, well we're just hanging out." It's like, I thought we were in a relationship, right? And so introducing your partner as boyfriend or girlfriend, watching the reaction, but be careful here because you might have public rejection, which, oh, that's gonna hurt, right? And so it could react in public acceptance, then you feel good and you feel stronger. but be careful at what could happen here. Know what you're getting yourself into. Now we have the separation test. So if you've ever heard the expression of like, oh, distance makes the heart grow fonder, that's what this is. If you're in a romantic relationship and you have to go away for a few days, and so maybe you don't text your partner those entire days, and you come home and they're mad at you, and it's like, well, that test failed because it was like you were seeing what was going to happen. Are you going to be mad at me if I'm busy on vacation or a work, deal? It says here that individuals, they might intentionally create physical distance to test the strength of their relationship. So if you're feeling a little bit sassy and you want to see like, would you reach out to me? Maybe you don't want to send the first text, so you're waiting for them to text you. And you just end up waiting forever. The separation test, it does show like, are you thinking about me when I'm not physically around? Now, the last two, they're going to deal with someone else. And so the third party test, this one, you're going to seek the opinion or the insight from your partner's friends, maybe their family, maybe just anybody else. Third party, though, you're bringing someone in and you're kind of involving them just verbally, seeking advice, trying to figure out what do you think I should do? You're getting their opinion, you're being influenced. Now, a triangle test, you're involving another person here. And this is the manipulation of involving that person and seeing how they can get information out of your relationship. So you're basically trying to induce like a jealousy reaction. I've seen TikToks where girls will ask other girls to send their boyfriends a message on Instagram and to see like what they will respond with. So the third party friend will send a message saying, like, oh, you're cute, we should hang out. And so the triangle test, we're manipulating that by like knowing the friend is sending the message just to see the reaction of the boyfriend or the partner. Now, this is interesting. This is some research focusing on triangle tests. Individuals with low self-esteem, they're going to use secret testing as a mean to break up. Because if you have low self-esteem, it's going to be hard for you to have this vulnerable conversation. And so you want to manipulate it so that you can easily blame it on them. Even though you're the one that like maybe caught them on the radio show, The War of the Roses, and you did the manipulation, but it's like, no, you're the one that decided to cheat. You're the one that decided to, go down that route. I think secret tests are so interesting. We use them. Do we like the outcomes? No, we don't. So we need to stop using them. We need to understand that they happen. And it's like, yeah, nothing's good gonna come out of this. Now, the first one, the directness, that's the most direct. That's the most like non-secretive one. So definitely engage in that one. Now we do have empty apologies. I know this one's tough for my people out there that say I'm sorry a lot. I say I'm sorry a lot. And so when we do apologize, we gotta make sure that it is honest, that it is authentic and meaningful. So when you do apologize, it's implying an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I did something wrong. I see that. And so it's also an expression of responsibility. You need to be better at whatever happens. It's a conveyance of remorse, seeing that you hurt your partner or your friend. It's like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And then it could be a direct request for forgiveness. I'm sorry, please forgive me, right? Now, there will be an effort to avoid repeatable consequences or occurrences here. Thinking, okay, I hurt my friend when I hung out with her friends without her. So it's like, okay, in the future, I'll be sure to invite you. In the future, I'll be sure to let you know, right? And so some individuals, though, they use apologies so frequently that it ends up just feeling meaningless. It ends up feeling like, okay, you're just saying sorry, but it's like, do you know what you're sorry for? Are you engaging in the expression of responsibility, commands of remorse, and then the direct request? Or are you just saying sorry because you know you should say, I'm sorry? Now, let's say that you apologize to someone. So, like the victim, you apologize to them. They're going to engage in apology, sincerity. This influences how the victim feels after the negative event. So, once you've apologized to me, it's going to be like, how am I going to accept it? Am I going to accept it? Is it going to be good enough? All of that. So we have to see the sincerity there and figure out what's going to be our next steps here, in a sense. Now we do have internet infidelity. This one has been pretty big within the last like 20 years or so, as the internet has become more of a space for people to be able to engage in conversation, communication with others, and kind of see pushing the limits of like how much they can like get out there. Maybe it's not much, maybe it's just a conversation, but some people might describe that as infidelity, as cheating. And so with the internet, it's going to provide privacy, the ability to interact frequently, and then it's going to also enable close proximity. I like this one because you could be anywhere around the world. You could be catfishing me and just be down the street. But while I'm texting you, I feel like you're here with me. And so partners, they're going to perceive their own infidelity to be more acceptable than their partners. So I want you to think about that. If I'm engaging in some type of like infidelity online, we're talking about online. You know, if I'm messaging people, if I'm telling them that they're cute, I'm asking them about their day, I'm getting to know them, and there's some kind of romantic intent, a crush, maybe just desire, any of that. But then if my partner does that, I'm gonna be way more harsher on them for doing that. But then if I get caught, it's like, I was just having a conversation. I was just talking to someone with similar interests. And so partners, yeah, they're going to take a harsher approach to internet infidelity with their partners than themselves. We always are ready to judge everyone else, but to ourselves, it's like, it's not that bad. It's still bad. You know you're doing something shady online when you know you can't just like tell someone about it, especially your partner. So here's 5 characteristics of internet infidelity characteristics. Thinking about like the ease and accessibility that people have towards downloading apps, towards hiding apps, using the private, Safari or Google Chrome so that people can't see your history. Just being able to like be so secretive. That's what makes it so easy to do this. And so, first off, the internet increases the speech and the speed in which messages are going to be sent. So, we're able to talk to people quicker, we're able to send messages to people quicker, and we're able to send them through like verbal or just writing messages. Now, reach enables individuals to establish way more relationships than in the past. I liked that your book talked about, think about the 80s. Think about how you cheated in the 80s. Now, it could have been someone at work, it could have been someone at school, maybe someone in your neighborhood that you see. Close proximity, those are like the only options, right? And so now, today, fast forward, what, like 40 years or so, we have the ability to reach anybody in the world. And especially with any app, if they're looking to talk to someone, I can easily find someone. Now, with anonymity, this opens up opportunities. I can be secretive. I can easily catfish other people. I can change my name. Be careful with the pictures that I post on there. If I kind of use filters or I don't show my face. But this interactive activity, it's going to allow us to be able to send and receive messages and react to them all the time. Remember, we're always online, always connected. And so individuals then, we're going to be deceived into thinking, I'm not doing any infidelity. I'm not cheating due to the lack of physical presence. However, talking to people on your phone, having that romantic intent, kind of just engaging in all of that. And I feel like if you know that it's wrong and it feels wrong, then it's probably wrong. Just because we're not physically meeting, at some shady hotel, that doesn't mean that it's not still infidelity, right? So we gotta be careful with this here and like understand something's happening here. So I do want to share some research with you about emotional versus sexual infidelity. And looking at first physical interactions with another individual, that's going to be known as sexual infidelity. We got the sexual intimacy, and some kind of physical involvement has to happen. So thinking back to the internet infidelity, is that going to be the same as sexual infidelity? Yes, it could be because I think about if you're engaging in sexting with others, you're sharing pictures, videos, all of that. But the physical involvement too, that's one part of it. So the intimacy doesn't have to be physical, although the physical interaction, we can kind of expand and think about other ways that people can engage in this, right? Now, check out this number. 30 to 40% of relationships, all type of romantic relationships, this is going to happen. This occurs. We're like, oh my gosh, that's a giant number. We are too close to half, right? So we gotta be careful. Now, with emotional infidelity, this includes that emotional involvement with another person. You're kind of like channeling these emotions and you're experiencing romantic love. You're giving them a lot of your time and you're giving them a lot of attention to someone that you're not dating. And so, emotional infidelity is like you're caring about the other person too much, but then your partner is right here. Now, there is some research I want to share with you. And so, forever in research, people have always said that women perceive emotional infidelity worse than sexual infidelity. And then men are actually the opposite. Men perceive sexual infidelity worse than emotional infidelity with their partner. So the men heterosexual relationships, men don't want the women to engage in physical, sexual infidelity. And then the women don't want men to engage in emotional infidelity. Now, there's been a lot of research on this because when I was going to school, this is like the way that it was, right? And so a lot of research pointed to that. But I'm happy to report that recently, you know, research has consistently showed that both females and males find sexual infidelity to be worse than emotional infidelity. And so it is interesting to see how the two different sexes think differently. But really, in the end, and as recent research has shown, we find that sexual infidelity, that's the worst one here. Alrighty, let's move on now to hurtful messages. Now, I know I have a lot here. We're going to just talk about each one just briefly, but I want you to think that when you're in conflict with someone, you're like in an argument with someone, these types of messages, when we receive them, how they can be really damaging to ourselves, damaging to the relationship. And then I think too, like, what are we even arguing about anymore? So this first type of hurtful message, that's evaluations. So with evaluations, I want you to think they assess value, they assess your worth. So a good example here would be like, you're the worst driver ever. And it's like you're accusing them of something. Now then we have accusation. And so this is an assignment of false or blame. Now, evaluation, you're evaluating someone, and then accusation, we're looking at the fault, the blame. So an example here would be like, you are the reason why we can never pay the bills on time. If you're talking about someone who's spending too much money in their relationship, you're accusing them, and we're using a lot of you language here. Now we have directives, and this can involve an order or it can involve like a command. So if you yell at someone like, just leave me alone, or you tell someone, go to, and you say something mean. I don't want to get flagged here on YouTube. But if you're like saying, like, stay away from me, you're yelling at something to something, you're directing them to do something, which usually means like, stay away from me, stop it. Then we have informative statements here, and these are hurtful messages that reveal unwanted information. So informative messages, they could easily be kept a secret, but then they're intended to be hurtful. So I know your book has an example here of like, I only hired you because the owner made me, or I never wanted a younger sister. And so you can see how like you're informing them on something, but you're just trying to be hurtful here. Now we do have statement of desire, and this one is when you're expressing your preference on something. So examples here might be like, oh, the night I met you, I was more interested in your friend than you, or Callie is a better friend than you. And so thinking about how you're desiring something else and now you're sharing it with someone, you're just trying to be hurtful. Now, with advising statements, this kind of goes for a call for a course of action. So you're advising someone to do something, but not in a nice way. And so I know your book says, like, you need to get some help. You can think, like, okay, that's going to be hurtful because you're telling them that, like, they need to change, and so they're the ones that are the problem here. We do have questions. And so you might think, like, well, questions are okay, though, to have. Yes, of course, questions are good. But when the intent is kind of negative here, when we're being rude and conflicting and having like the conflict here, the way you ask a question, that's how it can be hurtful. So your book uses an example of what is wrong with you. And so you might think to yourself, like, well, nothing's wrong with me, and then you get upset and now you have to defend yourself. Then we have threats. These indicate desire to inflict harm. It can be physical and it also can be psychological. If I was you're like, I'm gonna break up with you if you can't change your ways, you're kind of like making this threat. You can have indirect and direct physical threats. And then we have jokes. Jokes, they're gonna involve a prank. You're just trying to be witty with someone, but you actually really end up hurting them. This one I would look at and I say, like, bullies do this all the time. They pretend that it's not really that big of a deal, but it's like, no, you're actually really hurting the person here. And then our last one is lies. Lies are definitely hurtful messages. They're deceptive speech. You're keeping the truth from someone. You're trying to hurt them. You're trying to not let them know what's going on here. So you have these 10 hurtful message types. How are we going to react to them? We have these four different ways, and I'm not saying each one is the best way, but in all of the different circumstances in our lives, we're going to have to deal with them differently. And so, first off, we have active verbal responses. If someone gives you a hurtful message, they say, what's wrong with you? Then you start attacking the other person. Maybe you're defending yourself and you're asking for an explanation. So you can see how you're actively like engaging in the communication with them. So you can either attack them, what's wrong with you? Defending yourself, nothing's wrong with me, or asking for an explanation of like, what do you mean when you say that, right? Because sometimes people might not realize they're saying a hurtful message. So it's nice to kind of ask for clarification, being direct. Now we do have an acquiescent response. This one, and sadly, I do it a lot. It involves crying. If someone says a hurtful message to me, I get upset. I start crying. I might start conceding, and then I say, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me, or apologizing. I'm sorry. Now, hurtful messages, they can result in invulnerable responses. And so we've all heard the phrase sticks and stones may break my bones. And so that's not really true. A lot of times we can actually be hurt by this. And so we just like don't know what to say, right? And then it could lead towards maybe just ignoring the message, trying to just like laugh it off, but like you're still hurt from it, right? I would almost say that the last one is like kind of avoidance, but you're still acknowledging it because you don't know what to do. You feel awkward and uncomfortable. Now we have relational aggression, and we have two different types of behaviors here. So with relational aggression, these are behaviors that you're trying to hurt the other person, you're trying to harm them. This can come in the form of so many different ways. And so first off, with confrontation behaviors, this is direct. It can, like, you're calling the person a name, you're cruelly teasing them, and you have verbal rejection directed to the target. You're like making a bigger deal out of things. Now, with non-confrontational behaviors, this is indirect, not to the person. And so that's going to include rumors, gossiping, maybe social manipulation. You're getting all your friends to not like this one person. And so it really hurts the relationship. It hurts the reputation of the person. And this aggression can be a lot, and it can lead towards a lot of negative psychological pain. So with verbal aggression, yeah, it's going to attack the individual's self-concept. Think back to like chapter 2 or so. You're trying to create psychological pain. It is known as a destructive form of communication. Nothing good comes out of bullying. Nothing good comes out of, spreading rumors and gossip. And then we have some like pretty important history to share with you, research. And so with your relationship with verbal aggression, thinking about your family, when you experience verbal aggression within your family, you see it, you're going to think that it's acceptable then. So as you get older, you are going to engage in the same amount of verbal aggression. And then the more you're exposed to it, the more acceptable you are of it. And so it's like you got to break that cycle in a sense. Now, there is a ton of research in your book about the history of familial verbal aggression. And then there's also, and it's really interesting on page 509, research about college students, specifically women, and how they deal and how they manage with conversations of verbal aggression, how they deal with different types of verbal aggression. So I know some of them, they look at it as like, oh, it's venting, or they end up blaming the victim. They minimize their role. And so it's really, really interesting to see the way that this research has extended upon college girls, what they see. Now, here's, I believe, 10 different perceptions of verbal aggression. Now, I'm not going to go through each of them, but you can see how, and I had to laugh typing up these examples because it sounds pretty harsh, typing it up, but I'm sure that we've all heard, slash, we might hear, we've all experienced to some degree these examples. And so sometimes different forms of verbal aggression can attack your character, who you are. It can attack your background, if you don't have a college degree or where you come from. It can go into like teasing and ridicule and swearing. And so there's all these different types of verbal aggression out there. It's not just, a cookie cutter response. There's a lot going on here. And I definitely encourage you to take some time and read through this because I don't want us to engage in this at all. I want us to be aware of it and to walk away from it. Now let's get into bullying. So with bullying, I want you to think that this is a form of aggressive behavior in which a person with greater power, they're going to attempt to inflict harm on someone, maybe just make someone feel uncomfortable. And this is key here. It has to be repeatedly. It has to be like a occurrence that happens a lot, right? And so bullies, they're going to use their authority. They're going to use their size. They're going to use their power. So I know a lot of times when we see the words bullying, we might think about, little kids on the playground and there's a big kid pushing all the other kids. And so, yeah, it's a form of bullying. But then it can leak into, our adult lives. It can leak into the workplace. It can be within our families. And so when this does happen, bullies, they leave their victims feeling helpless, anxious, depressed. Those are so many different contexts that we talked about. And so there are three types of bullying. I will say I think there should be four. Number four should be cyberbullying, but the first type is physical bullying. This is the one that we think about, the kids on the playing recess, hitting, kicking, pulling someone's hair, giving them a wedgie, anything like that. This can be prevented by observers though, because people can see the bullying happening. So you gotta think, I need to stop this. Now, with relational bullying, this one it's more indirect and it's hard to observe it outside of the bully and the victim. And so this form of bullying is a manipulation of social relationships. Think about when you were like younger in high school, and if you were in a group of friends, and then all of a sudden someone told all the group of friends, like, don't hang out with that person anymore. We don't like them. We're manipulating the social, world to kick someone out in a sense. This can be withholding friendship, excluding someone. And so this does increase as children age because physical bullying is going to decrease. So the older we get, relational bullying, it's going to increase within our lives. Females are more likely to engage in this one. Research has kind of found that one. And so number three is verbal bullying, which observers can see. We can stop it. We can like notice and say, what's going on here? And this includes threats, degrading comments, teasing, name calling, even sarcastic comments, which people are able to say like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, it is. So I think it's good to recognize the ones you can observe because I hope you have the power and I hope you have the kindness to, put a stop to it. Now, with cyberbullying, we're going to get into behaviors such as flaming and outing. So I want you to think with cyberbullying, this could be sharing pictures, this could be spreading rumors online. And so flaming, this involves posting provocative or abusive posts. And then outing is sharing another person's personal information. There's a lot more research happening about cyberbullying. It is sadly becoming more common. And I think your book, I want to read it specifically. Cyberbullying is worse than traditional bullying. Because think about that. When you're in school, if you're in elementary school and you have a bully, you're only going to be bullied there from like 8 to 2 or however long school is, right? You can go home and you can get away from it. Then with cyberbullying, you can't get away from it so easily. Your phone is always near you, and you can see when someone posts something, they can like message you. You can see if it's posted on Snapchat or whatever. So it's harder to get away from, which makes it worse. So, how are we going to communicate our anger effectively? How are we going to kind of deal with this? And now there's four different ways in which you can kind of effectively, but maybe not always the best way, communicate anger. And so the first one, assertion, this is direct statements. And that's the good one. It's non-threatening. You're being assertive as in like, I want to share why I'm upset right now. I want to explain my anger in a non-threatening way so that you can hear me. Good. Be assertive, own up to your feelings, and be able to share them competently. Now, with aggression, though, this is a still direct way, but now you're being threatening, and it's going to involve some criticism towards the other person. So we're not really able to explain our anger very competently, very appropriately, and so there is some threatening going on. With passive aggression here, this is the indirect communicating, and it does have a negative effect because we're being destructive here. We're not having a good conversation. We're not communicating competently, and it does involve the silent treatment. We're not giving the other person the ability to share their piece. I don't want to hear about it. And so I'm being passive aggressive here. Now, with avoidance, you're totally avoiding the issue. You're denying angry feelings. You're pretending it doesn't even exist, pretending you don't feel anything. Now, you might question, like, well, why isn't the silent treatment avoidance? Because you are avoiding the person. But actually, you are more so engaging in not communicating that you're communicating that to them. So that's why it's not avoidance. Avoidance, though, you're staying away from the issue. You're pretending it just doesn't exist. It's not there. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to talk to you about today, and it's deception. I want you to think with deception, these are all different types of lies. Now, some people might lie to you because they don't think it's that big of a deal. They don't think they're hurting you too much. But whenever you're withholding information, That's pretty hurtful, right? It says here we must distinguish between a lie that is told for the benefit of the receiver versus a lie that is told with malicious intent. Are you just trying to make yourself look good or are you trying to hurt me? Now, lies told with a more malicious intent, that's going to be feeling deceptive. And so this can exist in any type of relationship. And I do want you to think with deception, it is purposeful, it is goal directed. You're trying to keep something from someone, and it can be used as a way to kind of control the relationship. So here's three different types of deception. And so this first one is falsification. And this is where you are deliberately presenting information that is false. You know what you're saying is not true. You know what you're saying is a lie. You're still going to say it anyways. So your book uses an example of, I did not drink when I went out last night, but you did, so you're just telling a flat out lie. Now with concealment, this one is the most common form of deception. And this one, oh, I'm sorry, falsification is the most common. I'm sorry about that. Concealment, though, this is another form of deception, and this is when you are deliberately withholding information. You're not sharing it. So falsification is you're just saying all these lies, the most common form. But with concealment, you're holding back information. So your book says here that like if you get a job somewhere and so someone asks you about it and you don't want to tell them about it, you're holding in that information. You're not being truthful. You're not sharing what you know, concealing the information. And then our very last one, this can be interpreted as having more than one meaning. So I love the example that your book has because it's talking about how you ask your romantic partner if they talk to their ex-boyfriend. She says, no, I didn't talk to him, but she was actually texting him. And so you can kind of interpret that as like, okay, you didn't talk to him, but you still communicated with him. So this type of deception, it's like I should have asked you a different question. Did you communicate to your ex-boyfriend last night? And so you can see how like we're withholding information. We're being truthful. So I didn't talk to him. But it's like, yes, you did, right? And so all these different types of deception, it can be hurtful to a relationship. And I want you to realize that and know that so that in any type of relationship that you have, you can stay away from these types of deception and you can recognize them if you start seeing them, thinking, oh, what's going on? But just remember, falsification is your most common one here. Great. I hope you enjoy this chapter. I know this chapter kind of looks at different things than we're used to. I hope that we're able to use this chapter so that we can have better relationships and engage in conflict like more appropriately. Alrighty, if you have any questions, please let me know, but I will see you later. Best of luck.